Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another episode and another special guest. Daniel, thank you for joining with us. Like I mentioned, we're switching things up a little bit with the intros here. I want to get right into it. I would say a lot of people, for the most part, you always have that kind of take when you're watching footy on the TV. You go, "Oh, if I owned the team, I would do blank," and you kind of have that phrase is thrown around very often. And in your situation, you're now in a role in your career where you're actually able to make changes at a very high level with Dagenham and Redbridge. So let's just jump right to it. Dagenham and Redbridge, how did you get here and why Dagenham?
Hey Chad, well thanks for having me on again. Great to be here. So Dagenham, the getting there was part of the journey, and now I'm there. It's great, and it started off with me having an interest in sports, having played soccer, football as a younger man, and then looking at different teams to invest in over a number of years. My background is an investor. I was in private equity before what I'm doing now, and spent a good number of years looking at where to go and where to get in to the sports ownership world, sports investment world, because that's what I wanted to do, and my background playing and also as a fan, gave me a great interest in doing that. And so I joined Club Underdog about a year ago. We can get into that in a while, but as part of joining Club Underdog, we were in the process of looking at expanding our portfolio of clubs. We're a multi-club organization that right now is in the process of growing its portfolio. And we found Dagenham, and Dagenham looked like a great opportunity both on and off the field. And so we did the deal to acquire Dagenham, and I'm really happy to be the chairman. I'm really happy to be running the team. I'll be honest, the results need to improve a little bit before the end of the season, but we're optimistic, and the appeal is both on the potential for putting Dagenham on the map. Obviously from an off-field perspective, from a commercial perspective, but also from really improving performances on the field and hopefully getting some headway moving up the ladder in the UK.
Yeah, so before we dive into, I would say, Dagenham as a whole, we'll kind of break down some of those topics that you just mentioned there. You spoke about your past and kind of getting involved with Club Underdog, getting involved in the investment space, specifically in the soccer world, in the footballing world. For you, can we get a little bit more of a cliff notes of what that background actually looked like? Why did you have the inspiration that wanted to lead to, okay, I want to get involved in sports ownership, in running a football club? I'm curious some of those kind of inside points from your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So I was relatively high up at a private equity firm doing investments, and the owners, the principal partners of that firm ended up getting involved in sports investment on a personal level. And I was close enough to see what they were doing and close enough to see how these deals were getting put together. And that kind of inspired me to do something similar. So I got together numerous different groups that we looked at acquiring our own sports team. And frankly, as you may have guessed, I'm from Europe, from the UK originally. And as much as I love US sports, football, soccer is my number one and the sport I'm passionate about. So it was obviously going to be in the football world. And then from that point on, started developing my own network and deal flow in terms of what types of teams are available in different countries, different opportunities. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of not great teams that are for sale that could be not great deals. So you end up kissing a lot of frogs before you meet your prince in this world. And what happened was I ended up getting hooked up with the Club Underdog team, and Matt Rosetta is my partner, and we decided to work together. And at that point, Club Underdog was Campobasso and Brooklyn FC, and then we added Dagenham. And because of my background in the UK, because of my knowledge of English football, I took the lead on that investment and ended up there basically from a generalist investment background to being exposed to sports investment from probably about the mid 2000s till now, when sports investment was becoming much more institutionalized. Large institutions were getting much more interested in investing in the space, and I was kind of at the kind of front row seat looking at that and learned how to do it from that and took it into practice in my own world. So I'm grateful for the past that I've had and what I saw, and I'm also grateful for having effectively a front row seat in the institutionalization of sports investment.
Yeah, we had Matt on the podcast, and he gave a good breakdown, I would say, from the Brooklyn FC side and the Campobasso side, as he's, I would say, a little bit more involved in both of those spaces. But from the Dagenham side, let's go back to pre-Dagenham, kind of club underdog. You're looking for that next venture. How does something like this come up? Like, what does the actual acquisition process look like from first discovering Dagenham as a potential, or kind of that scouting phase where you're looking and seeing, okay, what is the next step? And then if you can kind of take us through the process of what that actually looks like.
Sure. So to level set, the club underdog portfolio of teams is partway through its construction. So as you mentioned, we've got Brooklyn in the US, we've got Campo in Italy, and now Dagenham in England. The plan is to add more to those in due course, which we can get into if you want later. In terms of what the Dagenham acquisition looked like, as I said, from being in the business for a while, both me and Matt, we get a lot of deal flow, and there's a lot of, particularly now, a lot of sports teams, not just soccer, but other teams, other sports as well, being offered for sale. I think part of the institutionalization you're seeing of the sports business is a lot of legacy strategic owners, who have owned the teams for, sometimes 10, 20, 30 years, and are looking for exits and newer private capital stepping in. And so that creates a lot of deal flow. And frankly, us as partners at Club Underdog, we all have our networks and are known for looking for teams. So what happened was sell side folks in the sports world came to us with Dagenham and as they do with other opportunities, and we looked at the data. We looked at the deck, obviously, in the data room and the financials, and consider on a holistic basis more qualitative stuff like the potential both off the field in terms of finances and turning the team around off the field, as well as looking on the field as to what the prospects could be for growing the team into a League Two team maybe, or a League One team in due course. And we liked what we saw. I think the particular things about Dagenham that we liked over many other teams was the fact it's a local team but based in London. So you have the intimacy and the very strong support of being a smaller team, but you have the whole of London, one of the greatest cities, one of the biggest cities in the world, to count as a pool from which you can draw newer fans, new engagements, and frankly more revenues as well. So the London location was key. The history was key. We'd seen that Dagenham had the ability to get into the Football League, having had them done it before, and so the bare bones were there, and it's just a case of waking up effectively the sleeping giant, as it were, at Dagenham to take it up to higher up the English football pyramid. And as I said, we're working on that right now. We're in our first year. And I don't think candidly it's going to happen this year, promotion, but we're working on it for next year, and next year we've had a full pre-season as well as a full year in terms of looking at the place to actually really kick on. So the keys to looking at the deal once it comes through the door is really quantitative in terms of what the potential is and what the current state is of the financial part of the equation, as well as qualitative in terms of the dream. What could this be, and how could it interact with the community, and where could it go?
How do you approach it differently? Like, I'm looking at your background in generally in private equity and so on. So I'm sure you've been around multiple business acquisitions of other sorts that aren't in the sporting world. What are like the major differences? Like, are you sitting down with the fans and saying like, okay, we're the potential new ownership group? Like, are these conversations that are had? I'm curious how the approach goes with that. And then also, what are you buying when there's the acquisition of a club? What are you actually getting in that deal? Does the stadium come as a part of that? I know each club is kind of different and has a different situation, so I'd love for you to explain that side of things as well.
Sure. So I think there's two big differences in sports investment versus regular way investment. I think in regular private equity, you're buying a company, you fix it up, you make it better, maybe you sell at some point. Sports is different. There is, frankly, a lot of sports teams prior to getting institutional capital tend, in general investment terms, to be not so greatly run small businesses. And so, from using private equity experience and expertise, you can actually optimize the business side relatively easy compared to other acquisitions a private equity firm, for example, might make. And I think when you look at the bigger players in the private equity world buying sports teams, I think that's a big part of the equation. The other difference, I think, in sports investment is you need to have passion. So, because your fans have passion, your fans are your customers, they have passion. And being the figurehead of a sports team is more like being a politician than a businessman. Sometimes you got to deal with very different views and different opinions from different constituencies in your fan base, your customer base, and you've got to make them all happy. And so that is, you don't have to do that if you're a private equity firm buying a regular way business. So I would say those are the differences. And frankly, it's entertaining and fun to be in this position, and it's not always easy. But having much more engagement with your fan base and much more engagement with the people that care about your team as much as you do is a good thing, and that really helps that we're all pushing in the same direction. Rather than if you look at a regular way business, it can be almost adversarial with your customers, and that you're trying to make money out of them, and they're trying to get something for the cheapest, whatever they're buying from you. And so to have effectively the camaraderie when things are going good with your fans is a really nice thing to have.
Yeah, there's so much emotion drawn to it. Like each week, the entire emotions of the club, from the people working within it and the fans surrounding it, just can change. You win, you draw, you lose. There's a totally different variance in how people react to that. And that all ultimately everyone looks up. So the players eventually look up to the coach looks up to the executives of the club, and then it all eventually leads up to you, and you kind of have to make that decision. I like the tie-in with the politician. I think that's totally fair. It's much more of a political thing rather than a business thing because of the amount of people supporting the business in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to get into. Yeah, no, you're spot on there. Especially in the UK. The UK is like a totally different scene compared to the rest of Europe and North America. For the North American audience, though, listening in, I want to give a better explanation of kind of where the club is at. So in the National League, that would be considered the 5th tier in the UK. And then if you can break down, if I have that correct, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you can just break down kind of the situation the club was in when the acquisition first happened, kind of the first key goals in this year, like you mentioned, didn't really have a full preseason. You're kind of trying to figure things out at the same time. You're trying to solve the issues that are happening at the moment. And then if you can kind of guide into kind of what those next steps look like, what are the improvements being made on the field, off the field, kind of all around the club itself.
Yeah, sure. So that's right. We're in the 5th tier right now, and for the North American audience, the closest analog is probably Wrexham, and that's where Wrexham were when Ryan and Rob took them over. But we're staying in the 5th tier, all being well this year. The plan was to get to the playoffs this year, which frankly, unfortunately, isn't going to happen. Which is the way things work sometimes with promotion or relegation in Europe. But we're ready for that, and we are preparing for next season already. The reasons for that, I think, is some element of bad luck, some element of not having the best infrastructure in place when we came in, and some element of us not making the best decisions. Sometimes, we have to hold our hands up and be accountable and be humble. Everyone makes mistakes, and we're not perfect. And I think in our first year, there's maybe some element of that in what we've done, but we're looking forward to the future. I would add that the Wrexham didn't go up in the first year of their purchase either, and so in that regard, I think a full year behind us, having watched and learned how the club operates, how the league operates more, is going to serve us really well for next year. And so the stuff I think we got right was the commercial side is really humming now. There is a lot going on there that we are changing from before, and the increases in revenues we expect to translate to more budget on the field. If we were to say what hadn't gone so right, there is, obviously we're not in the position we want to be this year, but that doesn't, and that I think has an element of issue of recruitment, but I think we were also unlucky in terms of the players that we had. We did have a very big squad for a period of time, not quite as big as Chelsea's, for example, but it was bigger than it probably should have been. And that was a product of maybe too many loans sometimes. There's a lot of loan players in the lower leagues in England, and the size of the squad with injuries became a little bit too large. So I think that's something to think about for next year. And also, what we really want to do on the field next year, and this keys into how we think of Dagenham as a community club, is have a lot more local players that were born in East London, players that are from the area, playing for the team. And I think Matt probably talked about that for Brooklyn as well, in terms of having players from Brooklyn playing for Brooklyn FC. But the thing to be aware of, again, for maybe the North American audience that may not be aware of this, is East London is probably one of the top one or two in England in terms of the hotbed for good talent coming through, and probably one of the top 5 in Europe. So we are located in a really rich area of highly talented, young soccer players, and we want to tap into that as part of our success story.
Yeah, there's a lot of great insights there that you've tapped into. I think the first part that was interesting from my end, the difference between the commercial side and on the field. Would you say improving the commercial side from a private equity standpoint, or even from an investment standpoint as a whole, is much easier in terms of the routines or the way things are done? You can see kind of from an outside point of view of like, okay, these are the things we can change, where on the field might be more difficult because there's so many other variables. There's injuries, there's loans like you're mentioning, there's all these different things that come to play, different types of competitions. You got the FA Cup, you got all these other trophies, as well as the league. Is there more is it more difficult on the sporting side versus the commercial side?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they're both difficult, but I think the commercial side is easier to wrangle in the sense that you are dealing effectively with the financial side. The sporting side obviously is based on human beings, and human beings sometimes don't act in the way you expect them to. Sometimes they don't act in the way they expect themselves to do, and they don't perform in the way they want to. Sometimes on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have players who perform exceptionally well above expectations. So there's much more variability in terms of where you model your position to be versus where you are in reality. And as you said, luck has some element of that involved as well. And I don't think we've been the luckiest this year, but I'm not going to gripe and complain about that. Hopefully next year we will be lucky and be different. I think it's kind of swings and roundabouts, but the human element does create a significant variability, which is more difficult in isolation to deal with than, say, a financial element. Sure.
And then you tied in there the idea of Club Underdog really focusing on locality. So for you guys, recruiting from East London, Brooklyn FC, recruiting from the borough itself. Talk to me. I kind of want to transition things into Club Underdog as a whole. So when you're comparing yourselves to the Wrexhams of the world, or Sunderland, who had kind of a similar situation, Birmingham City, that sort of thing, what makes Dagenham Redbridge unique, but also the Club Underdog structure as a whole? I want to dive into that side of things a bit more.
Yeah, sure. So we've got great respect for Wrexham and Birmingham. They're doing fantastic. Sunderland, all the same. And it would be fair to say, the non-business side of the non-sporting side, sorry, of North Six is media and has activations in the media world. But I wouldn't say that our strategy is to pursue a media-first strategy, as you might argue Wrexham or Birmingham or Sunderland have done. That's not to say that we're not looking at doing TV shows or what have you for the various clubs, but it's not the main revenue driver. What we focus on at Club Underdog is being good quality operators and operating a team in a sustainable and sport-first manner, which involves engagement with the local community as the primary North Star, but with celebrity endorsements or celebrity activations kind of interweaved as well, but not as a focal point. But that I say is the difference. And as I said, I think for all of the teams we have, um, Dagenham's got a lot of potential. I think it's in the early innings of an element of gentrification, and we can help be a part of that to help Dagenham become a great place to live, a great place to grow up, and a great place to go and watch football. So the intention is always to win on the field while also engaging with the community. I think that's the differentiator for Club Underdog, and that's why we call ourselves Club Underdog, helping the underdog win.
Yeah, it's a unique approach, and touching on the multi-club ownership side of things. If we go more expansive, we touch on the entirety of multi-club ownership. Why has this become such a growing trend? I would say even 10, maybe 15 years ago, multi-club ownership was almost non-existent and not out there, especially in the soccer space. So I'd love to hear more on the trend of multi-club ownership as a whole. And then I think naturally it ties into Club Underdog and what you guys have done from your end.
Yeah, so like anything, I think multi-club ownership can be fantastic, or it could fall flat on its face. There's been some examples where MCOs haven't worked so well, and I think the key with multi-club ownership is getting teams that are culturally good fits, and also using the economies of scale of multiple teams to activate multiple revenue levers and sporting levers as well. So obviously, there's some easy stuff like, across a group of clubs, you could have an overarching, front office team, which effectively we do at Club Underdog, although individual clubs do also have their own front office folks on the commercial side. And you save on costs there by doing that. And I think the other thing that's important that we focus on, and as we grow our portfolio will become an even bigger focus, is kind of player pathway. And it's very rare for these MCOs, even like City Football Group or Red Bull, which are probably the biggest. They all have clubs that are at different levels in the various ecosystems that they're at, and even if they're all D1 teams, they're at different levels again. So you look at New York City FC and Man City; they're both technically D1, but I think we'd all agree Man City's a much better team. And so you can use the different levels of the teams to create player pathways to develop players, and you can also use the lower down teams to be effectively incubators for players that could come through to your marquee team, like the Manchester City of City Football Group. And so there's revenue levers in terms of growing your own and selling players, but there's also sporting levers in terms of creating an ecosystem where a fantastic player that may not make Manchester City's first team right now, but does make Melbourne City or New York City's first team, and give them game time rather than having to loan them out to another team. So I think there is, done right, MCOs are very powerful, and there's financial economies of scale and sporting economies of scale, but it's very easy to get it wrong. You have to be very careful how you construct your MCO to make sure all the teams fit together well.
And then from that play, the player pathway sort of discussion, where would you say you are along that timeline? Is it still in the early stages? I know Brooklyn FC, the men's side, is only starting next year. And then maybe we can even discuss the women's side, as Brooklyn FC would be the first women's team as well to be a part of the group. So love for you to touch on both of those points there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably giving away a few secrets here, but I'll do that anyway. So the where we are now is the very beginning of our player pathway plan. So we want to be, in the end, the intention is to be in 5 of the 6 largest markets for soccer/football in the world, and that's the US, that's Italy, that's England, that's France and Spain. Germany we love, but it's kind of difficult with the ownership rules there. So that's on the back burner for now. But Germany's also a fantastic place to be, both from a sporting perspective as well as an off-field perspective. And so what we want to do is actually have clubs, as I said, clubs at different levels across those 5 markets, and to create that internal kind of pyramid, with maybe one team being Division 1 or High Division 2 or what have you, to actually create an apex of that pyramid. And then, in addition to those teams, the plan would be to think about places like Portugal, Uruguay, Croatia, maybe Poland, Belgium, countries that have a history and a culture of producing fantastic players. You think of World Cups, Copa Americas, European Championships, all of those countries with, Poland's bigger, but the other ones with between 2 to 4 to 5 to 6 million people are competing all the time against the giants like France and Germany and Argentina and England. And so having clubs more on the youth side in those places to collect that talent at an early age and then feed them through our pyramid to develop them is really what we're focused on in terms of player development. And we talked about the financial side, but on the sporting side, that's really it. And that's our model and something we believe very much in.
And the women's side, am I poking or prodding too far here to ask? Is that in the plans? Is that something to look at expanding as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is obviously there's no crossover on the playing staff, but the plan is very much to grow our women's teams. As you know, we have Brooklyn, and they're doing pretty well. They're in the playoff spots for the USL Super League, the inaugural league now, and we're excited for where the season goes at the end. More recently, we agreed to acquire a club in Rome, a women's club in Rome, which I think is a natural expansion of what we're doing in Brooklyn, and also helps to create maybe that ecosystem on the sporting side we talked about with the men just now. And then not so much that we are involved in the ownership, but we are certainly partnered with West Ham United women who play their games at our stadium in Dagenham, and so there's a link there and there's activations there as well that we're really happy to have. And we value West Ham's partnership as kind of the big team that's closest to us in London, and the women is obviously part of that as well. So it's a little bit less down the line as the men, but we're certainly looking to create a women's ecosystem as well.
And you touched on right at the beginning when we were speaking about Dagenham, you kind of mentioned, look, these were kind of the key points we were looking for at our next expansion. Now that the group is kind of started to expand, you've got three solid teams on the men's side. You've got the women's side also started off. When you're looking at that next club or that next point that you want to get to, has things changed in terms of the approach and what you're looking for in that next club? I know you mentioned kind of looking for that apex point, but that could really come from anywhere. So I'm curious, in terms of just scouting and looking at that next opportunity, what's the mindset kind of towards that at the moment?
Yes, so I think the next opportunity that we're looking at is probably to fill out in Spain. Spain is a great market, and frankly, as I said, I love what I call the technical markets, the Portugals, the Uruguays, the Croatias, but we need to have the internal network to do justice to a player pathway there, and I think Spain is certainly something we're looking at there, and maybe a little bit more at market in Spain in terms of where it's positioned in the Spanish pyramid. But that's all subject to availability and subject to what's there. And as I said, there's a lot of opportunities. If you just wanted to buy a football team or a soccer team and you had the money, it's very easy to do. But to buy a good one or one that's got potential takes a lot longer in terms of time. So we're looking at Spain, but we're being patient there.
Yeah, no, well said. I've kind of switched up the sections a little bit here, and I've started a new section to see how it goes, see what the audience thinks. But I would love to get into more of like the storyline aspect and the behind the scenes aspect. So getting into Club Underdog, and I think for you more specifically, it would be Dagenham and Redbridge. Was there a time where you were like, basically the quote unquote, like, what did we get ourselves into? Like where you just felt a little lost. Everything was kind of turned upside down. I know it's only been this season, but I'm sure there's a time in that already that it's just been like, what have I done here? Like, what are we doing here? And I'm sure there's a positive turn to it, but I would love to hear if you've experienced that so far.
Yeah, so I mean, Dagenham's been on the whole positive, so there's been some bad results, and we need to do better. But I think the what on earth is going on moment has been, we had a habit of throwing away games in the last minute of many games, and it happened quite a lot. And I think we're much better at that now. But for a period of time, it was almost like clockwork. It was happening. So that certainly had me scratching my head for a while. But hopefully that's behind us now, and we'll win the games we need to end the season.
And I would say on the reverse of that, is there a moment where you were like, this is exactly why we're doing this? Like whether it's a fan interaction or something that you just almost clicked and you finally realized like, this was worth getting into. I know you had some incredible results on the FA Cup side of things. So I don't know if something that kind of ties in there.
Yeah, the FA Cup was magical. I mean, we got to the third round this year. The third round for the American audience is where you start to play the big teams, and we could easily have drawn a Premier League team in the third round, but we drew a second tier Championship team, which was still great. But it showed me what we could be. On the pathway to the third round, we had to play a qualifying round first of all, and beat a team below us in the pyramid. So we were the Giants, and then for the first round and the second round, we played a League Two team, which is the league above us, which was a good test and a good wins both time. And then in the third round, playing a Championship side, which is where you start to get to the real big clubs, was eye opening in terms of, wow, this is what we could be doing every week if we get this right. And the other thing in terms of the FA Cup that was encouraging was we beat two League Two teams on the road as part of the FA Cup. And I've always believed that the National League, that the hardest thing is actually getting out of it. And there's not that much difference between National League and League Two in terms of quality of the teams that are there. And I think that's evidenced by very few National League teams that go up come straight back down again. More often than not, they go straight up to League One, which is what happened with the likes of Crawley and Wrexham. So I think it gave belief in terms of, if we can only get out of this league, we're good enough for League Two, and at that point we can kick on and really grow what we're doing. So getting out of the National League is obviously the priority, but it gave me confidence that as and when that happens, we won't be out of our depth in the higher leagues.
What is from the club side? It just reminded me now that we're speaking about the FA Cup. I'm curious of if you could break down the revenue split. I listened to a podcast called My First Million, and whenever any founder comes on, they kind of break down, okay, what does the business actually look like? So from Dagenham and Redbridge's point of view, how does the revenue split, like what would an FA Cup run like that mean for a club? Is that extremely beneficial on like the funding side of things, but also just from like a player experience and the opportunity to actually be able to play big teams like that and kind of build the brand as an overall image?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, there's three aspects. There's the financial side, there's the player experience, and the fan experience. And the player and fan experience are basically the same. It's getting a chance to engage at a higher level in the pyramid than you otherwise would. The financial side of things is a little bit different. So there's two aspects. There's three aspects actually. The first is prize money. So if you win the games in the FA Cup, you get prize money, which gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the rounds go on. So obviously, if we'd won the third round, the payout would have been much bigger than having won the second round and having won the first round. The other variable is TV money. So all the National League games are televised on a streaming service, but the FA Cup is on a streaming service in the US, but in England, obviously, it's on national TV. And so if you're picked for one of the games on TV, which we were a couple of times, you get TV money as well, which is helpful. And then the third monetary aspect is the games themselves. So the way the FA Cup works, and I don't think this is any trade secret, the way the FA Cup works is that the gate receipts are split between both teams. Usually
even in an away game.
Correct,
for you guys.
Yeah. Okay. So the reality is, if we'd have drawn Manchester United or Liverpool or Newcastle or any of the very big Premier League clubs, we probably would have paid for our season. I think it was it Morecambe? It was a League Two team drew Liverpool and it was sold out and they lost, but they've certainly made a lot of money playing Liverpool at Anfield, and we didn't actually get that. Had we beaten Millwall, we would have played Leeds United away, which also would have been, though they're not Premier League yet, but they get a lot of fans. It's a big stadium, and there would have been a lot there, and especially being in the fourth round. There was potential always in the FA Cup for these big paydays, and that's what clubs at our level live for. To many times to balance the book. So I think about Tamworth in our league drew Tottenham, and they drew Tottenham at home. That they were able to sell out their stadium, but the reality is if they'd have drawn Tottenham away, they
Yeah.
would have a lot more money there. So it really is luck of the draw. It's not something you can bank on or model in terms of your financial projections, but it certainly helps if you get a big draw in the FA Cup.
It really is a lottery. You see those videos of players and executives celebrating when they draw a big team, and I think your first reaction as a fan is like, why? They're probably going to end up losing that game. But I think from the sporting executive sides and just the player opportunity of like, hey, I get to play against Salah or I get to play against one of these big clubs in the Premier League. I think that's what players live for, but also executives from the business point of view stand by.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I guarantee you the amenities in the locker rooms at Anfield and
Yeah.
the Emirates stadiums are much better than the average League Two or National League stadium. So much more comfortable for players as well.
Even in the away dressing room, I think it would still be better than the home dressing room back home. The next point that I wanted to get into here, what is the one experience or part of the job now that nobody warned you about? Getting into actually being an executive and having ownership in a club. Only now have you realized, oh wow, this is something that I really wasn't expecting as a part of the job.
Not to say I wasn't expecting it, but I think a common misconception is it's all fun and games and everyone's just laughing around. It's actually really hard work, I like it. It's good, and it's great to work on this. I really care about all of our teams, but particularly Dagenham because I'm most heavily involved in that. And it's a lot of work and a lot of stuff comes up that you might not expect. You're dealing with kind of HR issues and dealing with council, local politicians, a whole bunch of stuff that you might not think necessarily. Oh, running a soccer team, running a football team, is that part of that? It certainly is. You're really part of the community and really dealing with everything involved in the community as well.
And from your side, I'm curious, because of the American perspective, how is the balance being able to travel back and forth, managing the club while kind of being in two different places at once? And then what does your split look like in terms of your role specifically? Like, I know different club executives kind of go different ways in what they manage and what they like to kind of be a part of on a day-to-day basis. So I'm curious from your side, what are your kind of focuses or strong points?
Yes, so I'm the CEO of Club Underdog, so I oversee everything on the sporting side. I'm most heavily involved day to day in Dagenham, and Matt is most heavily involved in Campobasso, and all of us tend to pitch in Brooklyn, but obviously I'm not based in New York or London, so those of us like Matt who are based in New York and others of the team in New York are certainly involved more day to day. But the travel schedule is back and forth to New York, back and forth to London, occasionally back and forth to Italy, although, as I say, Matt takes the lead on that. So there's a lot of travel involved, certainly getting my elite status on my airline. but it's great to be it's great to be involved in all these different projects, and they're all very different projects as well, and they're different nuances and different challenges, different advantages in terms of where things go. So it's a very varied and interesting existence.
Yeah, I spoke about this. I can't remember with who I was speaking with, but a podcast not too long ago, and we discussed kind of having the outside perspective in any industry. So if you're looking at Dagenham, for example, if they just brought in another British executive that was there, sure, they would really understand that space. But you having this global vision of working with an Italian team, working with an American team, you can kind of, this is what we were speaking about with multi-club ownership. You can really share ideas, share visions, share different perspectives that someone in the National League might not have nearly of a clue of what's going on in the US in that sort of structure, where you guys are able to do that because of the opportunity in multi-club ownership.
Yeah, for sure. I think it goes both ways. I think we've got a good team on the ground, and we've actually expanded the team recently in London. And I think it's certainly value add to have experience of other leagues and other types, other areas of the game. But also the National League itself, you need specialist knowledge, which is good to have on the ground as well. And so being able to marry that, global knowledge with the specialist knowledge hopefully makes things run smoothly.
No, I appreciate the insight so far. Really, really, really interesting from my side of things. Should we wrap up here with some quick fire questions?
Go for it. Sounds good.
Let's do it. I know this is the first one here is a little bit outside of your model, but let's just pretend it's not Club Underdog. If there's a team in the top 5 league, I still could see maybe some tie-in or a way you could bring it about, but team in the top 5 leagues in Europe, what is one team that you guys would, maybe not as Club Underdog, but for Daniel himself, what is a team that's interesting for you?
That is interesting. So I would, in terms of what I think is a well-run, top-notch, top-tier club that accords with my values, it's a club I can't buy. It'd be Borussia Dortmund. I mean they've got everything done right. They are huge fan base, passionate fan base, but the club exists for the fans, and it manages to make money on the financial side, but it also manages to do really well. So I haven't checked their score against Barcelona. I think they're playing right now against Barcelona, but if I could have any team personally, it'd probably be Dortmund.
I like it. Let's see. We'll check the update here for you while we're looking at it. It's not looking good. 4-0 Barca, but you never know. There's a second leg for a reason.
All right, can I change to Barca?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the 50? It's a 50-50 split in Germany, right? Between the fan ownership and an actual ownership group?
Yeah, I think it might be 49-51 actually.
Okay.
So fans have control. But I'm not an expert on this because I just know we can't do it. But I think there's a couple of exemptions. I think Bayer Leverkusen and Wolfsburg might have been grandfathered in because they were already owned by Bayer, the chemical company, and Wolfsburg are owned by Volkswagen, I think. But I think that's the rule. You have to have fan control at least. I think you can slice and dice the economics so that outside capital has more of the investment, but I think the control has to be 51% plus fans.
Yeah, I remember Leipzig was also kind of a similar situation where they were so low down, kind of boosted in with money, and I know now, being in Germany for some time, that it's not a good look from the outside, but it's part of the football culture, like you say. What is we'll get to the next one here. What is one non-football related skill or habit that has helped you the most in the footballing industry?
Believe it or not, I started my life as an attorney, as a lawyer, and so being able to think like a lawyer, think analytically, it certainly helped me first of all in my regular investing career, and it certainly helps me now in terms of thinking about how to solve problems as they come up.
I think we could do a whole podcast on your past. There's so much to dive into. Every time we discuss a different topic, you have a different point of view. So that's really interesting. The last one here, if you could sit down with one person, past or present, who would it be and why for a meal to have a chat?
Well, I'll keep it football related. I'd say Maradona, and the reason being is obviously, we can argue all day about who's better out of him and Pelé and Messi, Ronaldo, etc. But I think he's certainly the most colourful of those characters, and would be the most fun to have dinner with and shoot the breeze over football and soccer, and also ask him what he really thought about that handball goal against England.
Do you think you could be a Dagenham fan? Do you think you could get him out to a game?
If Maradona was around and he wanted to come to a Dagenham game, I think it would be great. But I'm not sure. Being in England, I'm not sure the fans would be too appreciative of it.
That's fair. That's a good way to end things off here. Daniel, if you have any last words from your end, I think even just letting the audience know more about, we've discussed Dagenham, but where they can support, whether it's on social media and so on, and then we can wrap things up.
Yeah, we're online. We're on Insta and X, and TikTok is incoming. So definitely look up Dagenham, look up Campobasso, and also Brooklyn. We're really proud of all of our clubs, and we want to grow. And the more fans we get, the happier we are.
Daniel, thank you again for your time, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Jeff. See ya.